Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Africans Live at the Waterhole. My name is Ben Coley. Some of you may remember me. I have done this before. It has just been a while, and I'm absolutely delighted to be back with you and to be able to see some of the sights and sounds of the African bush, which I have missed dearly over the last 7 or 8 months or so. So I hope you are all doing well, you are all safe, and you are ready to join me for the next 2 hours or so as we explore a myriad of cameras from around Africa. And it looks like we've started at Stony Point with some of our penguins and a couple of beautiful little hyraxes down there on the bottom left. Don't forget, this is a live and interactive experience. Those of you who have got access to our app, you can download that and watch along live. And if you're watching on our website, don't forget you can register and ask me questions. Let me know what you're up to, let me know what you'd like to see, and just chat about anything you have on your mind, to be honest. So we would very much love to hear you. We'll try and get through as many questions and comments as we can throughout the course of the next couple of hours. It is absolutely fantastic to be back. For those of you who may remember me from the past, I've been on a bit of a hiatus for the last 7 or 8 months. I've spent some time out in New Zealand where I was doing some work for a retreat over there, a holiday resort, if you want to call it that, where I was very much involved with the stargazing activities, where I was working within one of the Dark Sky International Dark Sky Reserves, a gold tier one at that, which was absolutely spectacular. Got to do a multitude of stargazing evenings and telescopic work, but I did miss African wildlife. New Zealand is a beautiful country, but there is not much in terms of animal diversity, and having spent the best part of 17 years over in Africa, it was a little bit hard to deal with not seeing some of these beautiful animals. Strangely enough, I did see some penguins whilst I was out there. There are a couple of, about 6 or 7 different species of penguins that can be found in and around the New Zealand coast. I was based on South Island, and I got to see 2 of the rarer species. I do enjoy a good bird list, and I managed to amass close to 80 birds whilst I was over in New Zealand, which, considering I didn't get up to North Island, I think was a pretty good haul. But they included the little blue penguin, which I saw down on Stewart Island, which is a small island just south of South Island, which involved a somewhat tumultuous crossing of the sea to get over there, which we may go into a little bit later, but my sea legs are not what they used to be. They've got little blue penguins over there, and then also yellow-eyed penguins, which are endemic to New Zealand and very rare. Only a few thousand left in the world. So I was fortunate enough to see a couple of those. But this, of course, is an African penguin, busy grooming himself or herself there. But I have to say, I'm drawn to these little dussies, these little rock hyraxes, just enjoying some of the sunshine by the look of it, having a little sunbathe. I see we've had a couple of comments come through. Thank you very much. Valerie saying, "Hi Ben, welcome back." Valerie, it is an absolute delight to be back. I'm not going to deny I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't had to talk to you all live for a long time, so you'll excuse me if I have a few ums and ahs and struggle for some information here and there, but I'm sure you guys will understand and hopefully help me through it. Mercedes Bin, hello Ben, happy Friday. Happy Friday to you as well. It's always difficult to know which day it is, to be honest. The beauty of course, these cameras and the bush and the natural world in general is that they don't worry about days of the week. Every day is the same for them. The struggles, the delights are the same regardless. And Trixie Rose says, "Hi everybody, hi Ben. How super to have you back again. Welcome." Well, it's great to be back, and thank you very much for those kind words. I will actually be here for the next, I think, 5 days that I'm going to be doing Dam Cam for you, or not Dam Cam, the live at the Waterhole for you. So very much looking forward to seeing all these different cameras that we've got and enjoying exactly what we're seeing here with the little Hyrax. trimming his toenails by the look of it. I was always told that that was rather impolite. Interesting to see those little feet. Looks like the three toes. I'm having to dredge my mind for some of this information, but I remember the Dacian and the Hyrax tracks. They're quite distinctive. I seem to remember three fairly loby toes that you see in nice soft sand. But those toes are, or those feet in general, and those pads are particularly well adapted for their rocky outcrop lifestyle. This is where they love to be, and they actually secrete sort of a substance that come out of the paws of their feet, which just help them get traction on the rocks because they're surprisingly agile for, dare I say, little dumpy things. They skip around on those rocks and very barely slip, but they've got, say, this special secretion. It's not exactly glue, but a bit like if you were to spit on your hands if you need to grip something. It does that automatically for them, just to stop them slipping off those crevices, or in worst case scenarios, slipping off great cliff faces, because it's amazing where they do tend to end up. Susie C, you're thrilled to hear my voice again. I'm very glad to hear it. So I'm just reading the rest of what you've written there. Hope to see you at Juma again. I hope so, but we'll have to see how that one works out. Um, and yes, nice to hear of your doings overseas, but do stay here now. Well, that is the plan. I should actually tell you that I am broadcasting here from the UK. So I'm currently still not quite back in South Africa. I'm just back in the UK visiting friends and family before I do return. And I cannot wait. I have a very much a life back in South Africa that I'm looking forward to getting to. The first thing I'm going to do as soon as I arrive back and dump everything in my house is probably going to Kruger National Park for as long as I can, to be honest, and just get my fix of wildlife. Desperate to do some birding, desperate to see any and all African wildlife. Spas, no, I've never actually been to Stony Point, to be honest. I've spent most of my 15, 17 years in South Africa on the eastern side of the country. So I've worked most of my time within the Kruger and the private reserves surrounding that, and a little bit of time down in KwaZulu-Natal, working at a couple of lodges down there on a. I'm just being amused by this Hyrax is looking like it's thoroughly enjoying the warmth of the sun. Um, but I've only ever really been down to the Cape Town area once or twice. I have been to Boulders Beach, but I've never actually been to Stony Point in Betty's Bay specifically. So I have to say my knowledge of penguins is not spectacular. I'm not going to lie. That's why I'm very glad that we're focusing on these little Hyraxes at the moment. But it's somewhere I'd very much like to be or to go and visit, certainly. I've got a bit of a feeling of coastal birds at the moment. I did some coastal birding down in New Zealand because there's a lot of coastline quite close by. So I do need to get down to the oceans and to the coast of South Africa to add a few more to the bird list. They're such delightful little things, these hyraxes. They remind me of guinea pigs, which I used to have when I was young. But it's classic behavior for hyraxes. They're not very good at regulating their heat, so they do spend a lot of time lying out in the sun, absorbing some of that heat. A little bit like a cold-blooded animal, almost. Of course, they are not. They are indeed mammals. And a nice, strong social bond between the group. You see a lot of grooming going on of each other and spreading those scents between them. It's got a perfect little spot there, that little rock. I bet it's a beautiful view over the ocean. Probably also enjoying the antics of the penguins, which are just off shot for now. And doesn't look to be much of a breeze. Often, of course, these coastal areas, there is a bit of a breeze, and it must be more difficult for these hyraxes to control or regulate their body temperature with that cold sea breeze blowing. But down here on this part of the world, um, it's not such a big problem for them. But of course, we are coming into our cooler months now. Awful lot of scratching going on here, but I would imagine on the shore there are lots of little, as we would say in South Africa, little muggies, little insects. I don't want to say fleas, you get sand fleas and things, but I'm not exactly sure what you would get down there, but I'm sure there are lots of little bugs flitting around there to which they need to constantly clean their fur off. But this one at the front here looks very, very happy with life. Stretched out, belly to the sun. Best way to warm up. We mentioned their toes earlier, but you can see they have fairly unusual looking feet. Foot structure wise, strangely, they're very similar to an elephant, which many of you may know, but it's one of their closest relatives in terms of their taxonomical background. Two things that are looked at when classifying something taxonomically speaking are foot structure and tooth structure. Elephants do look as if they walk on the soles of their feet. They're what we call near ungulates. So even though it does look as if they're on the soles of their feet like we walk, they do in fact walk on their tiptoes. But they walk on this big spongy pad, which you can see sort of expanding and contracting as they put their weight on it to absorb the great mass of an elephant. And dassies, hyraxes are the same. They look as if those are the soles of their feet, like you and I, that what we would call a plantigrade foot structure. But they are actually walking on their tiptoes and have these specialized pads, which is a little unusual, but that's what makes them quite closely related to elephants. And then the other one with their teeth. They have forward-facing incisors. So just like elephants have tusks, if we could ever see inside the mouth of a little dassie there, you would see that their incisor teeth actually grow forwards, very similar to an elephant. It's one of those sort of classic stories you'll hear, or quiz questions, what's the closest relative to an elephant? And believe it or not, this is one of the most closely related things. Well, speaking of elephants, that's worked out rather nicely. It sounds like we may have some elephant activity at Tenby over in the Eastern Cape. Let's go have a look and see what's happening there. And there we go, right on cue. A couple of elephant bulls enjoying the mud in what looks like a very green Tenby Elephant Park at the moment. I know there has been a reasonable amount of rain recently, and the elephants are thoroughly loving it. So if any of you not aware of Tenby Elephant Park, there's a game reserve, sorry, I think I said East Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, which is quite close to the Mozambique border. And it's been around for 40 to 50 years now. And it was one of those reserves that was established to help protect elephants on their migratory routes between KwaZulu-Natal and to Mozambique. Of course, there was a lot of problems in Mozambique during the Civil War, a lot of persecution of elephants. So this is a lovely, about a 30,000 hectare reserve safe haven for the elephants. And we can see this relatively young elephant bull. It looks like he's going to have a bit of a scratch. I see, I've missed this. A lot of rabbits in New Zealand, but not too many elephants playing in the mud. Seems to be thoroughly enjoying life. Classic elephant behavior, but very important for the entire ecology as well. Of course, many of you may have heard the term keystone species thrown around a lot when talking about elephants, which basically means they can manufacture an environment that will have a knock-on effect of a whole variety of other organisms. So these little pans, like the one this elephant is rolling around in every time he does so, and digs with his tusks like we saw him doing now, and throwing that great mass around, just sort of slowly starts to increase the size of that pan, and every year it will grow larger. And when the seasonal rains do come, it's a great opportunity for other animals to use, rhinos, warthogs, buffaloes, all those animals that like wallowing. And it also takes the strain off some of the other permanent waterholes. We've got a little one there. Also enjoying a nice mud bath. So picking up mud sort of in the trunk and between those two little fingers that you can see at the end of their trunks, and tossing it on their back, and that just helps to keep some of the heat off. It's a natural sunblock, and also helps to sort of control some of the parasite load. You'll often see after the elephants have had a roll around and splash mud on each other or on themselves, they will then go and rub up against a tree and use that soil a little bit like an exfoliant, just to help dislodge any ectoparasites that might be trying to gain hold on that thick, wrinkly skin. Speaking of, looks like there's a little warthog there at the back, but fantastic to see a whole group of elephants together. Something very, very special about them, particularly their interactions. I think that's what I've missed the most. Of course, it's wonderful to just see these animals and just be in their presence, but I know myself and a lot of my fellow guides would all tell you that elephants are probably our favorite animals to actually spend time with and to watch, and just watch the interactions between each other, try and figure out exactly what they're thinking, what they're feeling from an emotional, behavioral perspective. They are quite open with their emotions, and whilst again we have a tendency to anthropomorphize everything, you can almost look at an elephant and gauge what mood it's in and watch the way it's interacting with the other members of the group. And it's very, very special. A lot of the more marquee animals are fairly solitary in nature. They spend time and just watch these family groups going around their daily lives is quite the privilege, very special. See that one being relatively, I wouldn't say wasteful with the water, but they know they can be here. I'm assuming that this water hole is pumped, so they know where it is, and there's always regular water. If this was very much the dry season, you would see when they suck up water into that trunk, which can hold 6 or 8 litres worth of water before squirting it into their mouth, you'll see they'll hardly spill a drop. But they know they can be a little bit more frivolous in an area like this. Spraying it all over her face. The one on the left there at the back has got beautifully symmetrical tusks. The elephant at the back wasn't too impressed with the warthog being in its way. We just ushered the warthog off. I'm sure it's not the first time it's happened to him. Ah, there's one having a bit of a scratch, and that is a boy, most definitely. So possibly the one that we saw having a nice little mud bath. He's now using that soil to good effect, and having a good scratch against the tree, try and dislodge any parasites, and to be honest, probably because it feels nice. I see we've had a couple more comments and questions coming through. Shane, you're asking or saying that tuskers are struggling in Tanzania due to the issues of poaching. Why is poaching prevalent in some parts of Africa more than others? Shane, that's a good question, and I can't really answer it, to be honest. A lot of it has to do with the socio-economic statuses of the countries, those countries that are poorer than others, where governments struggle to provide sufficient resources to the local people living there. Unfortunately, sometimes those people feel the need to take matters into their own hands, and it's a great debate, of course, as to what we all know it shouldn't be done. But to the person who's potentially starving or has a family of starving people, to them, poaching an elephant and getting paid a lot of money for it is a means of survival. So not condoning it in any way, shape, or form, but unfortunately that's the way that it is seen by those people who are often involved. And I think in other areas, a lot of it comes down to, well, again, it's sort of funding, because those areas that have very good anti-poaching units and more resources in terms of policing those areas, be it in terms of better fencing, depending on the type of reserve, the number of feet on the ground, and all of those things that go ahead or go along with it. The more proficient the anti-poaching units are, hopefully, the less poaching there will be. But it is a problem, and unfortunately, elephant poaching is not something we do hear as much about as we do other animals, purely because the population of elephants is a lot higher than some of the other animals we hear about. Obviously, the rhinos and some of the cats do get a little bit more, I suppose we could say, media time, just because there are fewer numbers of them. Elephants numbering hundreds of thousands. I think it's close to half a billion. Sorry, half a million elephants, wild elephants in the world. There is less fuss made about those ones which are taken, unfortunately. But thankfully, in areas where I've worked, elephant poaching has never been too much of a problem. In fact, I don't think that I have ever seen or heard of any elephant poaching taking place in any of the specific reserves that I have worked in. Certainly, we come across carcasses of elephants. Most of those, though, are from natural causes, be they disease or often an interaction with another elephant. And obviously, if and when that does happen, the first thing that happens after it has been reported is that the parks authorities from that reserve will come and remove the tusks, and take them away and stockpile them. Any tests that need to be done will be done. Any samples that need to be taken will be taken. And then nature is left to clean up, from the vultures to the hyenas and all the other scavenging animals, down to the smallest of the small, will leave very, very little behind. I see we've had a question coming through from Ella. Ella, age 12. Wonderful to know that some of our younger viewers are watching. You are the future custodians of all of these things that we enjoy and love dearly. So thank you very much. You're asking if elephants can get too much mud stuck in their trunks. Um, I'm sure they can do, Ella, but just like you or I, if we got something in our nose, you will just exhale and blow out through your nose and clear your nose pretty quickly. And I think they have a pretty good control over it. So they will know that they're getting too much and they'll stop. There's also lots of little hairs up there to stop too many big pieces of soil sort of getting into the nasal cavities. And just like our noses, the elephant's trunk will secrete a lot of sort of mucus, and that just helps to lubricate everything inside and helps everything slip out again, so it doesn't get stuck and lodged up there. But it's an incredible appendage, that trunk. That being said, I've seen elephants, speaking of poaching, that have lost trunks or parts of trunks due to snares, which of course are a horrific form of poaching because they are so non-specific in the animals that they target. And particularly when I spent some time last year up in the Punda Maria area, the northern part of Kruger National Park, almost every herd you could see evidence of damage to at least one elephant's trunk that was probably caught in a snare, and either elephants with only with parts of their trunks missing, or nasty sort of gashes, no doubt caused by snares. Okay, well, these elephants seem to have moved off a little bit and are hiding behind the bushes somewhat. So let's go try our luck at Madikwe and see what's happening up in the northwest of the country. Right, so welcome to Tower Game Lodge up in Madikwe, so Madikwe in the northwest province of South Africa. I have been to Tower Lodge once or twice, and this waterhole is one of my favourites. There's so much activity that goes on here. Often plenty of general game, lots of elephants. I've actually seen lions hunting in front of this waterhole before, and a leopard there, and got a few lifers from a birdless perspective from this waterhole as well a few years ago, which I remember well. But this is one of the things that I know the waterhole at Tau is very famous for. Of course, the Nile crocodile, and from this angle, a pretty sizable one. Difficult to get a sort of full point of reference, but looking at that elephant dung on the side there, there's a good sized croc, and you can just sort of see the girth of the body there. It's certainly not something that you would want to mess with. I think or many guides will tell you that the scariest thing out there is a buffalo, or the buffalo is the thing that many guides respect the most because of their unpredictable nature. I, for one, have never had a great problem with a buffalo. I'm probably a little more respectful of elephants just because I've seen what they're capable of. But in terms of things that would strike fear into my heart, as it were, I don't think you have to look much further than a crocodile. It's the ultimate stealth hunter. that has had hundreds of millions of years of practice. I would say it's the nature's epitome of if something isn't broken, then there is no need to fix it. Being a crocodile works. It is a tried and tested animal and has remained basically unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Actually, whilst I was in the UK a few weeks ago, I visited the Natural History Museum, which I try and do every time I'm back in England. If any of you ever get the chance, it's well worth it. It is a quite magnificent collection. Lots of really good information in there. And I always enjoy going to the dinosaur part because I like dinosaurs. I like space. I'm just a boy who never grew up, really. Um, and I was amazed to see there was one type of dinosaur there. I forget what it was, but they had a fossil of it there. And within the remains of that dinosaur, within the fossils, they found a fossil of a crocodile in its stomach, proving that dinosaurs, even way back then, were feeding on crocodiles. And they also found crocodiles with remains of dinosaurs in their stomach. So it just goes to show these are true relics of a bygone era. You can see those lovely little protrusions on the back, which you saw clearly when the crocodile was out of the water. Those are known as osteoderms, and they help with thermoregulation. There's a lot of blood capillaries close to the surface. The blood capillaries kind of loop up and over those little ridges, and so they heat up relatively quickly because they're close to the surface of that thick skin, and then circulate that newly warmed blood to the crocodile and to the rest of its organs, being a cold-blooded or ectothermic animal. It, of course, requires outside influence to control that body temperature. I think personally, though, when I think of crocodiles, I think of the time that I spent up in Katavi National Park, up in Tanzania, which is one of the lesser known national parks in Tanzania. Of course, most people know the Ngorongoro Crater and the Serengeti. But Katavi National Park, so where I spent a year working at a lodge up there, is down in the southwest corner. So some of you may have heard of the Selous Game Reserve or Ruaha, and then Katavi is sort of next door to those, between there and Lake Tanganyika, close to the Zambian border in the south. And Katavi is reputed to have the highest population of hippos and crocodiles in any reserve in the world. And having seen what I saw, I could certainly believe that. And quite a few perennial rivers and massive sort of floodplains there, and you didn't have to look very hard for crocodiles. Hundreds of them lying out on the bank wherever you went. It also made it very interesting from a walking perspective. We did do some walking safaris there. And hippos and crocodiles you had to be particularly careful of, especially during the dry season, because the water dries up. A lot of the younger individuals or older individuals get ousted from those retreating pools. And it was not unusual to find a hippo just lying in the shade under a tree, or even a crocodile as well, just taking a break, potentially for days at a time, just saving energy, not moving, and trying to keep cool in the shade. Grant, thank you for the question. Can crocodiles see underwater? I believe they can. Grant, yes. They, like many other animals, have what's called a nictitating membrane, which is like a third eyelid. It's a little bit like a pair of goggles, really, that goes in front of the eye so the eye can remain open, and that membrane just helps to protect the eye from the water. That being said, I do not know too much about crocodile vision specifically, which I will certainly go and have a look at because it's a good question. Um, So I imagine they would do a lot of their sensory work through picking up vibrations of things moving in the water. But yes, absolutely, they can see underwater. Lady Macbeth, you're suggesting that I try the Tring Natural History Museum. I have not been there at all, so I will certainly do that. I do enjoy a museum, particularly from a natural history perspective. Seeing some of the evidence of other animals, and they're so good in terms of an educational perspective now that you do pick up lots of interesting tidbits. So I will definitely have a look at the Tring Natural History Museum. Thank you, Lady Macbeth. And it seems here we have some black-winged stilts, if memory serves. You'll have to forgive me if my bird knowledge is a bit rusty, but I think this one is fairly self-explanatory. But this one I do remember from last time. Very long legs, very long red legs, probing around for little arthropods. So lots of grooming going on, which is nice to see. It seems to be a grooming day. We've seen the Dussies doing so, elephants having a scratch, and now the stilts giving themselves a good clean, just waterproofing some of those feathers. Excuse me. So most birds have a specialized gland on their backs known as a preen gland or a uropygial gland to give it its proper name. And you'll often see those birds that sort of gives off an oily secretion. They'll pick it up with their beaks and spread it around their feathers, just to keep them a little bit more waterproofed, and also potentially to help control any parasites. We have some teals as well. What I assume to be red-billed teals. And normally I'd be using my bird app to confirm everything, but rather annoyingly, my phone has died on me. So I can't double check, so I'm going to trust my gut and go with red-billed teal here. I love those two-tone faces, that distinctive black and white face, and then the red bill gives it away. One in front just had a little yawn. Always wondered, do birds yawn? Is it more to exercise that beak? Because it does an awful lot of work throughout the day. The ducks filter feeding, constantly running that bill through the water and pumping the tongue in and out in order to get all those little pieces of plant matter into the beak, filter it out. Or maybe it is actually tired. Who knows? Strangely quiet at Tau Waterhole this time around, by the looks of it. Normally expect to see lots of animals um, in that area at the back, particularly that open area, but don't see much today. But going back to those stilts, they lovely to see those pied stilts. Now, I should say, oh, there's a couple of stilts by the look of it. I should say that whilst I was over in New Zealand, I was very lucky enough to see um, a, quite a few actually black stilts, one of the relatives of the pied stilt. And the black stilt holds the rather unfortunate record of being the most endangered wading bird in the world. I was lucky enough to see some in the wild, and also got to go out with New Zealand's Department of Conservation at one point and spend a day um, actually feeding is the wrong word, but helping a batch of immatures that they'd recently bred and were releasing into the wild. So just giving a little bit of a helping hand. And we were putting some food out for them and chasing away some of the seagulls who were trying to steal the black stilt's food. But that was very, very special to be a part of an initiative like that. There are, of course, conservation initiatives all around the world. I didn't realise this before I went to New Zealand that such a bird existed, and that a black stilt was in fact the most endangered wading bird in the world. Now, where I was based was close to some glacial lakes, very close to the base of Mount Cook, which is the highest peak in New Zealand. And the lake that is sort of fed from that glacial runoff is known as Lake Pukaki. If you haven't been, I strongly suggest that you do, between Lake Tekapo, Lake Ohau, and Lake Pukaki. If you ever want to see blue water, you should go there. It's full of what's called glacial moraine, so almost sort of microscopic particles of rock from all the glaciers, and that just gives the water this most incredible turquoise colour. But it's also the perfect habitat for these stilts. I've said a couple of times they were the most endangered wading bird in the world. To put that into perspective, as of, I think it was last year, there were less than 200 birds in the wild, which is a terrifying thought that on an entire planet there are less than 200 of a particular species. So that's why New Zealand's Department of Conservation, or DOC, as we call it over there, had this project going, and they have rescued the numbers. The numbers have almost doubled, I think, in the last 10 years or so. So hopefully they will continue to rescue that species. But it's one that doesn't get a great deal of notoriety. We were out walking on the banks of Lake Pukaki and happened to come across one of these wild individuals. I was lying on the floor taking photographs and doing what us crazy nature-loving people do. And a group of people walked past and sort of said, "What on earth are you doing?" And I explained what I was doing. And they were amazed by this and also started taking photographs of it. They'd never heard of such a bird and weren't aware that that area was where one needed to go in order to find these black stilts. So if nothing else, I feel I did a good job in raising a little bit of awareness. If any of you watching have ever seen a black stilt, I would be very interested to hear. Like I say, you are one of the lucky few. A quick view at some weaver nests there in the acacia. What have we got down there? Is that another teal? No. Ah, it looks to me like a yellow-billed duck. A duck with a yellow bill. It's nice when they give things common sense names. It's a fairly unique perspective of one, looking straight down his beak. Beautiful markings. Where are your friends, buddy? It seems to be having a relatively quiet day today. Oh, did you see? Look out for that crocodile. Crocodiles do eat birds sometimes, certainly, if the bird is caught unawares. Not a huge part of their diet, but I personally wouldn't want to be sleeping right next to the water when I know crocs are involved. See, just on the far left as well, sitting on the floor, they just see an African monarch butterfly. Lovely markings on those feathers. Excellent camouflage for a relatively terrestrial ground-dwelling bird. find a lot of those ground birds have got that sort of speckling pattern on their feathers, particularly on their backs, just to help them blend in. Some of the spurfowls, the franklins, the quails and button quails, all very, very difficult to discern. Those are particularly nice markings. It looks as if his eyes closed there, having a good sleep. Of course, birds also have that nictitating membrane we mentioned with the crocodiles. And the same way the crocodiles can use them to see underwater, you get some of the diving birds like petrels. They do the same thing, close that nictitating membrane, are able to see through it whilst they're diving deep, deep down underwater looking for fish, and also flying at high speeds. You'll find those nictitating membranes engaged, if that's the right word, and they act like a pair of goggles. Like if you're driving at high speed, you have a visor down, just to avoid anything flying into your eyes. Even elephants that we saw earlier also have a nictitating membrane. If you watch them closely, you see this little eyelid sort of flick out from the side, just a way of lubricating the eyeball, getting rid of any dust and other little micro things that get into the eyes. They've got those big long eyelashes to protect them, but when you're spending 24 hours a day out in a dusty, sometimes windy environment, very dry environment that Africa can be sometimes, it's important to have all the mechanisms to keep your eyes in good check, particularly for birds, which of course are hugely reliant upon their eyesight. Some of the most astute eyes in the animal kingdom. Okay, but it's a surprisingly quiet afternoon at the moment, at least, at Tau up in Madikwe. So we're going to try our luck over at Rosie's Pan and see what's happening over there. We've got a ubiquitous warthog. Everything is enjoying a little bit of heat and the mud. So Oliphants Game Reserve, not too far from Juma, just north of Hoedspruit. It's in the Limpopo province. I'm not exactly sure where in the reserve Rosie's Pan is, but I have worked in Oliphants West Game Reserve. It was actually my very first job after I finished my training. I did 6 months of work experience, my very first lodge, and that was based in Oliphants West Game Reserve way back now in, I was going to show my age, 2007 that would have been. I spent a petrifying 6 months there as I took on um, game drives and safaris for the first time on a semi-professional basis. I will never forget it because the very first game drive I ever did, I think I arrived on the Tuesday and was told that I had my first game drive on the Thursday, and that I would be receiving the owner's lawyer and his family, which was utterly petrifying. But I suppose it's probably a good thing, jumping at the deep end. No repercussions for that, thankfully, and everything else seemed relatively simple in comparison. See, Mercedes Bean, you are suggesting that if anybody is ever in North America, they have a chance to go to the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park. It is the place to visit for nature lovers. Um, the San Diego Zoo, I believe, is world renowned. It's certainly one that I know of and have heard lots and lots of very, very good things about it, not just in terms of being able to see cool stuff, but in the way in which the animals are looked after, the enrichment activities and behavioral sort of studies that are done there, and the research coming out of San Diego Zoo. As far as I know, it is one of the premier zoos in the world. So thank you, Mercedes Bain. If anybody is thinking about heading over to the southern side of North America, see if you can pop into San Diego Zoo. Grant, thank you for the question. You're asking why do animals like warthogs and impala flood the market with young? Well, it's just one of various different strategies used within the natural world. And it's a bit of an unfortunate one, but it's again a tried and tested method. There are many predators out there, and young animals, young impalas, young warthogs are fairly defenseless. They don't have any particular effective way of defending themselves. They're not toxic, they're not poisonous, they don't have a sting, nothing like that. They have to rely on their parents or the other members of their group to look after them. Um, and the sad fact of it is that many of those youngsters don't make it. Um, so it's a question of, whilst they don't have multiple offsprings themselves, or warthogs have, yeah, could have maybe up to five or six little piglets. Impalas, one, very, very, very rarely you'll get twins. But what you do find is most animals coincide their births to around about the same period of time, coinciding with the wet season in South Africa, certainly, which would start any time really from sort of October onwards, November onwards. Um, so whether the animals, I don't think all the animals do it in order for protective purposes, although that is a byproduct of it. The main reason that they all do give birth around that time of year is, in my opinion, threefold. It's because the rain brings with it food, water, and shelter. So it's a beautiful time of year to visit any part of the world where lots of baby animals are coming out, are joining us. It is something very, very special about seeing them all frolicking, that sort of innocence of youth. But it does unfortunately mean that the predators do have a bit of a field day. The hyenas, the lions, the leopards, even the birds, the snakes, all the things really. It's like ringing the dinner bell, and plenty of opportunity for predators to snatch a relatively easy meal. But individual animals, of course, will have their own defensive mechanisms. Warthogs will spend a lot of their time underground, which is good protection against most predators. Yes, lions and leopards sometimes, or lions sometimes dig them out. Leopards have a tendency to just sort of lie in wait, waiting for the warthogs to come in or out at the beginning or end of the day. And then, of course, you've got things like impalas that do tend to hang around in big herds, which means lots of eyes, lots of ears, and a far better chance of spotting danger approaching before it gets too close. And then if the alarm is sounded by one, everybody's alert, and 9 times out of 10, that predator will very soon give up on the chase because it knows it's been seen. It's lost the element of surprise. A very, very good idea to be vigilant at all times. Okay, well, again, not much happening at Rosie's Pass, so let us try a little bit further afield. Let us head up to Kenya and Oldonyo and see what is happening in East Africa. Ah, some, I assume, Maasai giraffes. If we're up in Kenya, I saw plenty of those in Tanzania. They were like impala up there. Once tried to actually count all the Maasai giraffe we saw on a single game drive, and after we got to 100, we sort of got a little bit bored of that game, to be honest. Now, I've never actually been into Kenya myself, but I imagine that these would be the same giraffe. Certainly, the patterning looks like it's slightly smaller than the Southern African giraffe, and those more irregular patches that you can see on the skin, giving us a little bit of a mirror image today. But as we were just saying, it's probably by design. What you don't want to be have happen to you out there in the African wild is to be caught unawares. And by facing in different directions, it just gives you a much better lay of the land in case anything is sneaking up on you. You see the grass is quite thick there, and giraffe are particularly good at spotting danger coming. Very, very good eyesight, very aware, generally nervous animals. Nervous is a bit harsh. Vigilant, perhaps, is a better word. Both of them just enjoying a little bit of shade and heavily ruminating, so just regurgitating some of that previously swallowed plant material, chewing it again and again and again and again, breaking it down into little tiny pieces, which just enables it to be absorbed far quicker, passing through those four chambers of the ruminant stomach: the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum. Very efficient way of dealing with your food. It requires a lot less food because you're extracting the maximum amount of nutrients from it. But on the downside, you do need to eat good quality food because that food remains in the body for quite a few days. So it's a bit like if you were eating fast food all the time, your body just can't extract enough goodness out of it. Something attracted the attention of the giraffe, looking straight at us. Other one doesn't seem to be too fussed, but it is something that we use out on the safari to help us locate prey. So because they are so inquisitive, and again from a sort of a reading of body language perspective, if you see a giraffe staring at something in one particular direction, there's a very good chance that there is something there that's attracted their attention, and they're sort of straining to get a good look at it. Many times we spot predators or just simply other animals by following the gaze of a giraffe. Beautiful lush greenery. Looks like a type of a butylon, a similar flower, that yellow one there in the corner. But I have to say, not having spent much time in Kenya, I don't really feel qualified to discuss the flora of the Kenyan area. But nice to see such vivid greens, certainly. And there's particularly a little hardy little plant that's got an excellent viewpoint there. Plenty of access to moisture. I wonder if that was probably deposited in a seed from something that came down to drink and defecated there. And that seed was able to germinate under very good conditions. Done well not to get trampled. A beautiful swallowtail or sword-tailed butterfly of some sort flitting around there as well. Sugarbits, you're asking if any of the wild animals get cataracts. Again, I'm not a veterinarian, but I would assume that they do. I have seen various animals that have had eye problems. Most of the time, however, that's been caused by an injury or by fighting or running into a branch or a claw or something. But I would go out on a limb and say very likely they do get cataracts, but I'm not 100% certain of that. But say some of the, I remember we had a leopard, one of the lodges where I used to work, and he had a fight with another leopard, badly damaged his eye. And about a week later, when we started seeing him again, or a couple of weeks later, when the tissue damage had healed, that eye slowly became that sort of opaque color you would expect to associate with the cataracts, and he did in fact lose the sight in that eye. But he still learnt very well because his depth perception was, or still hunted very well, learnt to deal with that disability because his depth perception was hampered by that. He changed his hunting strategy. His name was the Sand River male in the southern part of the Sabi Sands, and mentioned it briefly earlier with warthogs. He used to find an active warthog burrow and would just lie in wait very close to the entrance of that burrow, often on top of a termite mound, because that's where most of the time the burrows are. And he had the patience of Job. He would wait there for hours and hours and hours, waiting for those animals to either come in or come out. Did manage to see him. I remember finding him one evening lying next to it, and still the next day he was still in the same spot. And that's a beautiful bird with a long tail. But say, unfortunately, I'm not sure what that is. If anyone does know, feel free to let me know. But somewhere back in South Africa, I have a beautiful bird book with all of the birds south of the Sahara. But unfortunately, I don't have it with me. Otherwise, I'd be frantically flicking through the book. And oddly, when I was in Tanzania, because it's quite far south, most of the birds that I was seeing in Tanzania are very similar to the ones that we found in southern Africa. I'd say probably 80% of the birds there can be found somewhere within southern Africa, with just a few exceptions. But up there in Kenya, it's very different. Ray, you're asking, just going back to those giraffe, you say you know that giraffes don't sleep for long, which they do not indeed. Are there any wild animals that go into a deep sleep? Well, again, I guess it sort of depends on what you define as a deep sleep. But yes, there are animals that sleep for longer periods of time and a lot deeper than some of the herbivores. Ones that spring to mind are certainly most of the carnivores because they don't have too much to worry about in terms of predators to themselves. Ooh, there's an impala. So lions can sleep up to sort of 18 to 20 hours a day. Um, and one of the other reasons they do that, A, they don't have, oh, hello, baboon. They don't have too much to be concerned about. Don't stand on that nice little plant that we saw earlier. But they also, by eating protein and being carnivores, they have a much more energy-rich diet, so they don't have to feed the whole time, which a lot of herbivores do. Rhinos also will sleep for sort of 6, 7 hours a day. So quite normal to find rhinos lying around enjoying a rest during the night. And of course, baboons. They'll also go into the trees every night and they will have good sleep. Again, whether you call it deep sleep, they're still relatively aware of their surroundings. I don't know if anyone's seen the recent series of mammals, the latest David Attenborough documentary, but in the very first episode, there was some incredible footage of a leopard somewhere in Africa, I can't recall where, hunting baboons at night time up in the treetops. Absolutely amazing. The baboons did hear him or her coming. I can't remember if it's a male or a female leopard, but some amazing footage of the leopard leaping around the tree trying to grab himself a baboon. And they do look very funny when they sleep, baboons. They're almost, well, very human-like. And they do snore. It's like our impala might be thinking about coming in for a drink as well. Now, often in southern Africa, we do associate baboons and impalas with each other. They often do have this sort of mutualistic relationship where you'll see them feeding together, impalas beneath the tree, baboons up in the tree, both benefiting from each other. The impalas probably get the better of the arrangement because they get to feed on any of the interesting things that the baboon knocks down out of the tree, but also particularly the baboons say very vigilant on the lookout for predators. Main lover, that's a controversial question. What do I think of wild animals, or sociable animals being held in small spaces or cages in captivity? Well, Main lover, I think there's a fairly simple answer to that. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Um, I think every animal should have at least the minimum amount of space. I think it does become a very difficult subject, and everybody, of course, is entitled to their own opinion. I know a lot of people don't like zoos, because of what they stand for. Neither do I particularly. However, I do see there is a need for them in terms of protecting a very small number of animals, particularly those ones which have a great endangered um, status for them, so that we can keep the genetics and the gene pool there. But I think for me, the most important thing is, if you are going to have to go the zoo route, is that those enclosures must be designed with the animal in mind. There must be good research done in terms of the enrichment activities. The animal's behaviors and mental health is particularly important, because nobody, let's be honest, wants to go anywhere and see animals looking miserable, or upset. I certainly know that I wouldn't. The other thing that zoos do, I mean, we mentioned the natural history museums earlier, is, again, so long as it's done properly, a zoo has the ability, at least, to reach a huge number of people who wouldn't otherwise be able to necessarily get out to places like this in Kenya or South Africa or Botswana, Tanzania, Zambia, wherever it may be, or any country where the animals that they are keeping are from. And it can raise awareness to their plights, and it may incite people to help get involved in conservation initiatives to help the wild populations of those animals. And I think that's very, very important. We still need to raise awareness for the voiceless. These animals can't tell us what the problems are, but those people who do it properly can at least spread the word and educate and encourage people to learn more about these creatures. Interested to know what that one at the back is nibbling on there. Kind of looks like sitting there biting her nails, but I'm sure she's not. A little morsel from somewhere. Of course, baboons, great omnivores, eat pretty much anything, even those baby impalas that we were talking about during the onset of the rainy season, when we had that big flooding of the market, as it was put, with impala young. Some of the big male baboons are quite capable of taking out young impalas, but most of the time it'll be little insects, little arthropods, fruits, berries, and whatever else they might find. It's lost a bit of its tail. Now he lost that, possibly in a interaction with another baboon. I'm sure there's a lot of tail biting that goes on, or possibly against a predator. I think it's nice for these animals to have those giraffe in the background. I almost feel like they're sort of monitoring them, just keeping an eye on everything. And their presence will give these animals a little bit more peace of mind. Because remember, you are very vulnerable when you come down and drink at the water. You're not keeping an eye on your surroundings. It's actually one of the true benefits, I think, of these cameras with actually, well, completely zero human interaction or human interference is probably a better word. We get to watch these animals. There's always a part of me that wonders, even though the animals that I've been so fortunate enough to watch over the years are completely aware of our presence and relatively oblivious to it. We're always able to watch natural behavior. You always wonder if your presence is having any effect. But to be able to watch on cameras like this is exactly what the animal would be doing or animals would be doing, whether we were there or not. And it's actually fantastic to be able to watch baboons. It's one of the things that perhaps people don't think of too much when they come out on safari. But if you can find a resident troop of baboons or vervet monkeys, for that matter, down in southern Africa, you can sit with them for hours because they're just so entertaining, similar to the elephants because of that social structure, the way they interact with each other, the behavior that they exhibit, a lot of the mannerisms which we can relate to because of their intelligence levels and the way their society is run. Very, very special. It's one of the bit of a shame though when I've done a lot of stints for Wild Earth at Juma over the years. Very, very rarely have I got to have a nice sighting with baboons or vervet monkeys. I remember one with vervets, and we sat there for 2 or 3 segments just watching them clamber around and trying to figure out what they were thinking. It's something we don't do enough, just sitting and watching a lot of time sort of with sleeping cats or following cats through the undergrowth, but spending time with a troop of baboons is highly entertaining. So he's been left on his own. Oh, there we go. I did see a female come past with a youngster attached to her belly just now. She's went off to the left somewhere. We haven't seen any really young ones. Yes, there's one at the back there, a younger one. Oh, looks like we've got a few more young ones coming in together. It's been nice. Pretty sure I don't know what the baboon just said to that impala, but I think it was the equivalent of "mind where you're stepping." Ilandi, yes, I have seen baboons discipline their youngsters. It seems a little bit almost aggressive at times, but I'm sure it's not. You see the occasional sort of teeth being bared, but the youngsters do have a tendency to make quite a fuss over it. I must say, they do scream. They don't like being disciplined, but who amongst us do? But yeah, very entertaining to watch, and it needs to be done. They have to learn how to act. Oh, possibly not, possibly not like that. But say those interactions and the level of parental care from baboons again, I think it's something that we as humans could relate to, just because of the similarities. Reversing in part. But yeah, the noise of baboons getting disciplined, you often hear it in the early hours of the evening when it's time to go to bed, and the rest of the troop are settling up in the trees, and sometimes the youngsters have still got a little bit of extra energy. Yes, the baboons. And others seem to be okay. But you often hear it in the evenings, just at sort of sunset, lots of screaming from the trees, the kids who really don't want to um, go back to, or just don't want to go to bed. Ethan, you're right. Baboons have exceptionally large canine teeth for an omnivore. In fact, a canine tooth of a baboon is longer than that of a lion. So don't ever underestimate a baboon. They are immensely powerful, incredibly strong, and yes, can deliver a pretty horrific bite if they had to. So I will always say, if a baboon does take your food, which can be a problem in various reserves and campsites, as tempting as it is, just learn from your mistakes. Don't leave food lying around. Be more vigilant, but don't try and get your food back, because they can do you a serious amount of damage. As I said, they are omnivorous. Yes, they eat fruits, but they also do eat meat. Um, so big male baboons will take young impalas and other small mammals as well. So more than capable of taking something that you may not always associate with monkeys and primates. So yeah, be very careful. When you see a baboon yawn, you really get to appreciate the true length of those canines. I'm sort of guessing, but I would think in terms of ruptured tooth, and it can be up to a good 2 inches, I would think. Don't know what gave them a bit of a fright there. They went scampering off, but interestingly, whatever it was bothered them, but didn't seem to bother the impalas, who would generally be more skittish. If this giraffe's going to come in for a drink, that would be pretty amazing. It's an awkward grace of the giraffe when he drinks, or she drinks. And it is quite typical of giraffe to take a very, very long time to come down to the water, scuppered like that on safari many, many times. We think, right, the giraffe's going to come down for a drink. And it takes the giraffe half an hour to get from about where it is now up to the waterside, because they, of all the animals, are probably in the most vulnerable of positions by having to spread those legs, duck that head down into the water. They have got no means of keeping an eye as to what might be creeping up on them, and predators have learnt that waterholes are good places to hunt, and they can't move quickly from that position either. So they're often very, very tentative when coming down to water, particularly if it's quite heavily vegetated, just to make absolutely sure, or best they can, that the coast is clear before bending down for a drink. Jesus and other animals, I'm very glad that you have enjoyed live at the waterhole thus far. Of course, we've still got some time to go, but I certainly have. So this is the first time I've got to see, dare I say, sort of quasi-live African animals for a very, very long time, and I've sat here with a pretty dopey grin on my face through most of it. The baboons didn't go far. I wonder what upset them. Beautiful giraffe bull. Of course, we can see it's a bull by looking at those ossicones on the top of the head, much thicker than a female's. And if he bowed his head slightly to us, we should see that calciferous deposit right on the tip, which is just used for fighting. There'll be fawn markings around the nostrils and the lips. I don't recognise those before. Still looks like a youngish male, but has a very pronounced bump on the forehead. Of course, we expect to see more males than females. You can see those bumps above the eyes as well, like two little sort of golf balls that have been pushed in under the skin. And I'm sure on the back of the neck, at the base of the spine, we'd see, or base of the skull, sorry, we'd see two other little um, protrusions there. Again, a bit like the top of those ossicones, that is all just the body depositing calcium as the bones are being strengthened, and that makes that head a more effective weapon. It's a bit like a mace, a nice heavy head by the time it's swung on the end of that long neck, they can generate a huge amount of force. And when males are spatting with one another, they can deliver knockout blows, quite literally. Of course, that classic long tongue. Oh, what have we got there? A squirrel type creature. The ground squirrel or something similar. Again, quite what we might find up in Kenya. Perhaps some of you who are more regular viewers will know better than I do. But let's have a look and see if we can figure it out. I'd say that looks like a type of ground squirrel to me. That big bushy tail. All creatures great and small. Sarah, you're asking what is a giraffe's closest relative? Um, to my knowledge, I stand to be corrected, it would be the okapi, which is a lesser known um, antilopian type species, more from Central Africa. That's a very odd looking thing. Has the hind quarters striped, a bit like a zebra, and then an elongated neck, like a giraffe, but by no means as elongated. So I believe it would be an okapi. The other thing, and I've never seen one, that's definitely a boy. The other thing, and I've never seen one, is something called a gerenuk, which I don't think is related to a giraffe, but it's a strange looking thing that you do get in East Africa. I don't know whether we've ever seen one on a camera here, but it looks very similar to an impala in terms of its sort of general shape and size and coloration, but it has a really long extended neck. It's like a giraffe with a an impala with a very long neck. And they're often known for standing on their back legs to reach higher up into the branches to get food. Definitely a type of ground squirrel, this. It's classic behaviour. Don't get blown over in the wind, chum. I love the way they put their tail up. They often use it like a little bit of a sun hat if it's too hot. Trying to work out which way the wind is coming from there. That tail seems to have spread it out. So I'm wondering if he's sort of using it as a bit of a windbreaker, putting his back to the wind and fanning the tail out just to block off some of that wind. What you got in there? Oh, not perhaps what he thought. But I'm sure there'll be some really interesting little seeds and things there with all those deposits from other animals. Maybe got, oh, there you are. Dig. Shuffling along. I'm sure he's going to find something in all of that dung there. There we go. No, we didn't like that, whatever that was. Uh-huh. Getting a good view of his surroundings there, taking whatever sort of husk is on that seed, whatever it may be, trying to get into the good stuff in the middle. There we go. I think he's got the tough outer shell off, enjoying the nut in the center. I'm not sure whether ground squirrels store nuts the same way that the tree squirrels do. Oh, there he goes. Ah, that would be why. But it's nice to think of those tree squirrels as also having their role in the environment as well. They bury an awful lot of the food that they do find for themselves, and then apparently they often forget where they've buried a lot of it, so they're inadvertently planting seeds for the trees, which is rather convenient, rather nice of the squirrel. But everything does its bit for nature. Let's see if this little one's going to hop off and have a drink, or be quite happy with his vantage point. Well, the little one definitely had the best seat in the house, but just going for a quick drink. So you're going to go and catch up with the rest of the troop. A bit of a strangler. We've got some nice sedges there in the foreground on the left with those sort of tufty white heads that you can see there. Difficult to say for sure from here whether they are sedges, but something you would expect to find close to damp areas characterized by square stems as opposed to circular or tubular stems like you'd find in grasses. And very, very important again from the environment because they have a great way of absorbing toxins and things from the soil and are used a lot in water purification, natural water purification methods. Here comes another one with a little baby, a much younger baby, clinging onto the stomach. Let's hope she doesn't put her chest too close to the water when she has a drink. I'm sure she knows what she's doing. Can hear some voices. You might be able to pick up on those as well. So I don't know too much about this particular webcam, but I imagine then we're quite close to the lodge. And if there are some people moving around, I think that's what the animals have reacted to. I've just been informed that there is a hide close to the waterhole. So yes, I think that's why when you go into a hide, you're often asked to whisper and keep noise down and not move too suddenly. The animals do react, particularly those that aren't as habituated as others. Always makes me sort of feel like I'm going into a library when I go into a bird hide, just sort of whispering to everybody, and everybody's talking in whispers and trying to move incredibly slowly. But it's good to see, to share time with like-minded people. Out there in New Zealand, down in an area called the Catlins, which is in the southeastern part of South Island. That's where I saw that very rare and endangered yellow-eyed penguin, and did so from in a hide. And they are known that a little colony, excuse me, a little colony lives there, and you can go and sit in the hide, and they usually come out late in the afternoon to roost. But the day I was there were quite a few seals and sea lions around, which are not particularly known for eating penguins, but it seems that that particular group has learnt to eat penguins. They've discovered that it's a relatively easy food source for them. So we were warned that we may not see anything, but often with nature you have to be patient. And I think we waited there for the best part of 2 hours before one individual finally climbed out of the sea onto the beach, on the sort of the other side of the beach from where the sea lions were resting, which is what we expected, or seals, I think they were. An amazing view of a yellow-eyed penguin. But just goes to show you have to be very quiet and very still. And we were probably a good 100 meters away, but still, we're enforced by a couple of the people there. If anyone raised their voices, they were asked to be quiet. Very, very library-like, and rightly so. Oxpecker lands on your lip. I think I'd also try and get rid of it. So again, which oxpeckers they have up in East Africa, I need to check. I'm used to red-billed and sometimes yellow-billed oxpeckers. I don't know of any other species, but there may well be. But anyone who's not come across an oxpecker before, that's the little bird on the giraffe's neck there, who's looking around for ticks, little pepper ticks, and more engorged ticks, and just plucking them off the fur of the animal. So doing a wonderful job in keeping the animal clean, but they also can have a negative consequence to the animal because they what the oxpecker actually wants is the blood. So you could argue it's almost sort of bat-like in terms of blood sucking. And if there are any open wounds on the flanks of that giraffe or anywhere on the giraffe's body, you'll often find oxpeckers congregating there, and picking at the dried blood and the sort of scab material that's being formed, and that can lead to secondary infections. They also, strangely enough, eat earwax, one of the very, very few animals that can digest earwax. They often do disappear into the ears, although I think predominantly they are looking for the ticks in the ears because they do congregate in there, but have been documented eating earwax. Straws being harassed a little bit. And they do also utilize other parts of the animal, where the oxpeckers nest. They're sort of closely related to starlings in a way. So they're also hole nesting birds. They don't nest inside the ears of animals, as some people may tell you, but they'll nest in a hole in a tree, a natural cavity somewhere. They can't excavate it for themselves, and they will often line their nest with animal fur that they pluck from things like giraffes and other antelope species. Victor, you're asking if it's only oxpeckers that feed on ticks on animals? No, there are others that do so. Obviously, it's not easy to eat something off another animal unless the animal in question is happy for you to do so. The other most obvious or most well-known relationship like that, is actually with terrapins. So when an animal comes down to drink, it'll often wade into the water to do so, and you will often find that the terrapins will sort of come from all sides of the dam and merge towards that animal, and then they will then remove ticks off the legs and the bits that are closer to the water. So you often see that happening with rhino and particularly herds of buffalo, when they come down to drink at the waterholes. You'll see all the terrapins feasting best they can. I'm sure there are other things. I'm trying to think of anything else off the top of my head, that would specifically go for ticks on animals. I'm sure there are, but those are the two the most obvious ones. Of course, we get other sort of relationships, not necessarily with ticks, but removing things growing on animals' bodies. We see it more in the ocean. with those little fish that attach themselves to sharks. You get other ones that follow whales around. You get the clownfish that feed other fish. So we see it almost more in the oceans than we do on land. The animals are a little bit less tolerant, and it's more difficult to get onto that animal. There have been reports of crocodiles being cleaned by birds and things, not oxpeckers. Ticks are one of those things. To be honest, nobody likes ticks. If anyone's ever walked through a pepper tick nest or something, you'll remember it probably for the rest of your life. The itching that you get, particularly around the lines of your socks and your belts, even just walking through the bush in general. But like everything, they do have a role, even if it may be a more unsavory one. It keeps the immune system up to date, keeps the immune system working, and anything in moderation can be a good thing. And what it also does do, if any animal loses condition or is sick or ill, their immune system not working as efficiently, then the tick load can increase, and it might spell the end for that animal. But if that animal has a reason that he can't deal with the tick load, it's probably not a bad thing that those genetics are not passed on to the next generation. So it is a sort of a form of population control. Not a nice way of looking at it. Not always a positive thing for the, well, not a positive thing for the animal involved, but it can be a positive thing for the survival of the species in general. Quite a few oxpeckers congregating on the back of the one on the right-hand side there. This one on the neck of the one on the left is probably thinking, fantastic, I've got this entire giraffe to myself. Actually looking forward to going on a bit of a hunt for those yellow-billed oxpeckers when I get back into South Africa. It's always interesting to see how their range is changing. It's nice to be able to see things happening within our lifetime. Generally, nature moves quite slowly, but human influence and human interference has caused it to require to speed up. And the yellow-billed oxpecker used to be very widespread in South Africa up until it was around the 70s, when there was a lot of use of DDT, which is a type of insect or insecticide to control tick numbers, and the practice of dipping cattle and things to control tick numbers took its toll on the yellow-billed oxpecker, and they all but disappeared from much of southern Africa, or South Africa particularly. But over the years, they have made a bit of a comeback, and they are spreading further and further south again. They used to only be sort of almost a sort of a northern Kruger special, but I have seen them in the far south of Kruger National Park not that long ago, and I know there are some studies being conducted by sandparks with regard to their distribution and the recovery of their former range. And if you do see yellow-billed oxpeckers in the southern part of Kruger, if assuming this research project is still going, we were being encouraged to send in details of where they were seen and what they were feeding on, what animals. But the main reason that they struggled was because the red-billed oxpeckers, which have slightly smaller bills, are more specialised to pick up the pepper ticks, which are like the nymphs, the very young ticks. They're very, very small, smaller than a pinhead, and you'll often see the red-bills sort of scissoring their beak through the fur, removing great swathes of these pepper ticks, whereas the yellow-billed oxpecker has a more sturdy beak, and they are designed really for plucking off the fully engorged adult ticks. And of course, it was those that were really being removed by those insecticides. And that's one of the reasons why that population all but disappeared. Danny, you're asking whether female giraffes engage in necking, and not really. To be honest, if they do, I've never really seen it. It's more resigned to the males. That's why they have those thicker horns. And generally speaking, the males of all species will fight in terms of dominance and also for the chance to mate and to impress a female. Females have got much, much smaller, thinner, and less sturdy ossicones on the top of their head. They're not really designed to have them bumping into each other. And generally, you don't see females with deformed ossicones, where it's quite normal to see males with deformed ossicones, because when they are born, they're still quite soft and they get dislodged into a funny position or manipulated through a blow into a funny position before they've completely ossified and become bone. You don't really ever see that with females. So, to my knowledge, Danny, if they do, I've never seen it, put it that way. That's some nice words from Hilary. Thank you, Hilary. So it's wonderful to have me back on Wild Earth. It is indeed wonderful to be back. I've thoroughly enjoyed today and looking forward to the next 4 days as to what we might find on these down cams. And yeah, hopefully I'll have an opportunity once I'm fully back to do some more, but we will have to wait and see. But crossing fingers. Janine, also nice to, you said it's nice to hear my voice. It has indeed been a while. Yeah, and well, get used to it. You're going to hear me for the next 5 days or 4 days from today. And from Itzy saying, what a beautiful sighting of giraffe. And as I say, it's nice to hear my voice again. How nice to hear that from all of you. I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit nervous. It has been a while, say, since I have done this, and it might take me a little bit of time to get back into the swing of it, dredge up some of those memories, access the old hard drive that was put to one side for the last 6 or 8 months. But yeah, an absolute treat to be back and to be able to communicate and hear from all of our avid viewers makes it all the more special. Joanne Mello, do animals get sick from ticks like they do in the USA? Absolutely, they do. There are a whole host of tick-borne diseases. Um, I was thinking about listing some, but then I thought I'd better not in case I get them wrong. One that I know that affects giraffes is one called heart water. So that's a big problem. There's rickettsia, obviously, which we get in humans. Something called sleeping sickness as well, I believe. So yeah, so not a veterinarian. It's not a strong point of mine, but yes, there are a whole host of diseases which can be passed on to other animals via ticks. And as I was saying before, that's one of the good things slash bad things about ticks is yes, they can have a detrimental effect on the animal, but by removing those weaker individuals within the species and not allowing them to procreate and pass on those genetics, hopefully from a natural selection perspective, a greater tolerance to those tick-borne diseases is built up throughout generations. It's good to me. Thinking about female giraffes necking, Danny, I honestly don't think I've ever seen it. They're generally very docile and placid. Um, it's not something I've heard of, but I'm just racking my brains to think if I have ever seen it, but I don't think so. Often we see the young males engaging in sort of, sort of gentle necking, which is more play than anything else. It's actually quite rare to see two males really going at it. I've never seen one knocked off their feet or knocked out, but I know it does happen. I've seen footage of it, and one of the small reserves I worked at just outside Nelspruit during COVID, once things sort of started to get back up on their feet again. I know they had a giraffe which had a fight with the neighbouring giraffe over the fence and apparently actually broke the other giraffe's neck. Such was the blow that it dealt it. So they can be highly aggressive, but no, the females they generally all get on. Still really hoping one of these giraffes comes down for a drink. A great way to end the afternoon that would be. Come have a drink. Something attracted the attention of this giraffe, and I'm wondering if anyone is going to have a drink. I'm really hoping we do. We've only got about 15 minutes left, and it would be a really nice way to finish this session. Okay, it sounds like whilst we do wait to see if anything is going to happen here with drinking giraffes, we're going to head back over to Rosie's Pan and Olifant's West and see what's happening there. Our first proper herd of impalas thinking about coming down for a drink. One doing a little dance in the back. Again, you can see this female looks like she's coming down towards the water, being very vigilant. Interesting to see that 1 second from the front there in the middle of shot. Looks like he's not really feeding on anything, but there'll be little tiny tufts of grasses and things coming through after the recent rains. And one of the specializations that impalas do have is that sort of split lip, a little bit like a rabbit, and that enables them to get very, very close to the ground and crop very new shoots that are coming out, and they are generally the most nutritious. You usually get a lot of sort of salty deposits in these areas close to drainage lines and waterholes as well. So anything that does grow in that rather barren looking soil is often quite laden in necessary minerals that animals require. So they're very much the choice cuts. They're really nice for me, at least, to just see. Well, I'm sure for everybody as well, but just to see impalas and appreciate them. They are one of those things that because we see them so regularly, they do often get forgotten about. But I've always maintained that they are one of the prettiest antelope, prettiest animals that we have out here. So sleek, so elegant, and so adaptable. That's why there are so many of them, and so interesting to see some of them feeding on little stems coming through the ground, others happily feeding on leaves, that mixed feeding habit that they have being one of the reasons that they are so successful. And we had a grey go-away bird who went away. It is also sort of snuffling around on the ground there, depending on what trees that are here. They may also be finding little seed pods and things which hold a good amount of protein. Coming into the dry season, they will be relying quite a lot on that as the leaf material and the grass vegetation does die back. A slender mongoose. Very nice to see. Did you see? There he goes. There he goes. Just ran off behind from that little fallen tree. It's attracted the attention of the part. Is that youngster going to see? What is this thing? Very, very cool. Little slender mongoose with his long tail often held up, sort of arched up over his back, like we saw then. Oh, that was cool. I'm sort of thinking about what my highlights have been for the last couple of hours. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing that slender mongoose. I enjoyed the hyraxes right at the beginning. But I think of that little ground squirrel. They're so cute. Watching him nibble away on whatever he found in the dung there next to the waterhole up in Kenya there. I think he's been one of my highlights. Interested to hear what your highlights have been. If you do have any suggestions as what you've enjoyed the most today, feel free to let me know. Eddie, which other animals do oxpeckers land on? Well, I couldn't really list them all. There are many. Everything rhinos, buffaloes, impalas, wildebeest, kudus, nyalas, most of the antelope species, down to about warthogs. I think warthogs are about the smallest thing that they will use. They won't land on elephants. Elephants don't like oxpeckers, and when you've got a trunk, it's much easier to sort of swap them off. But a whole variety of things, oxpeckers, they are not species specific. And Janet, are impala the most abundant antelope in SA? Yes, in Africa, I wouldn't like to say yes in case there's something I don't know about in terms of numbers of gazelles and things within East Africa. But yeah, very much so. Impalas hugely abundant in South Africa. Hundreds of thousands of them just in the Kruger Park alone. Because they are so successful. And again, it's one of those difficult discussions to have, but there probably should be some more culling of impalas. I know culling is always an unpleasant thing to talk about, but in restricted areas, restricted by fences, and with things like pumped water holes, too many impalas can become a problem because they're quite water dependent animals. They never stray too far from permanent water, and if you keep giving them access to permanent water, they don't go very far. And they multiply and they absolutely hammer the vegetation within that area and don't leave and give it a chance to recover. So that can become a little bit of a problem. And again, a lot of trampling of things down. You'll often find very open areas close to water holes. And not only do they potentially damage the vegetation, but they will then also make it less abundant for other herbivorous animals. I always remember the statistic that in terms of body weight, an impala eats 3 times more than an elephant if you compare it to how much the animal weighs. And there are a lot more impalas than elephants. So you can imagine how much foodstuffs are being removed only up to the height of maybe a couple of meters or 90 centimeters or so by an impala. And that has a massive effect on what is available for other browsing animals. Carol, you say the baboons with the babies on their back was your highlight. That is a very good one. I had forgotten about those. There's so much to think about. Yes, I particularly enjoyed that one who just decided that it had the best seat in the house whilst Mum was having a drink and just sat perched there up on her back, enjoying the view. Another great highlight. All highlights. But thanks so much for all the questions and the comments that have come in. It's great to hear from you all, and it helps me keep my brain on track and say find some of the stories and the experiences that I've had over the years. It's a wonderful way to keep the brain active. So thank you very much, and please do keep them coming in. So a lot of ruminating going on, standing in the shade. So this is a perfect place to be. Access to water, nice and open, so they can see potentially any danger coming, and plenty of food around. I'm seeing a little bit of grooming activity. Of course, impalas are well known for their allo grooming of each other, a bit like primates do as well. Yet another reason why they are so successful, to be able to keep each other clean. Certainly, these are animals that you don't see sleeping very often. We had a question a little earlier about animals going into deep sleep. Impalas do not at all. They will lie down in the evenings and they'll take little cat naps or little impala naps, just sort of 5 minutes at a time. But they generally do so in nice open areas, because there will always be a few individuals who are not sleeping who can keep an eye out for any potentially marauding nighttime predators that might be interested in what they are up to. And again, various studies been done to show that animals ruminating, their brainwaves almost go into what we would expect to see when an animal was sleeping. So they also, in effect, resting whilst ruminating. Sinji also saying it's nice to have me back. Thank you, Sinji. And yes, I hope to see you all at Juba or somewhere similar in the future. But say we'll have to see what happens, what the world has in store for us all. But yeah, I hope to be back in South Africa proper in the next few months, if not before. And yeah, cross my fingers I get a chance to visit Juma one way or the other, catch up with some of the characters from down there, and have been obviously trying to keep an eye on them whilst I can. Prairie Dog, you've enjoyed the whole show. Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Yeah, it's difficult to pick highlights. It's just fantastic to be a part of this and see this, particularly from all the different cameras that we've got. Pubicon Color, how great this has been to listen to Stargazer Ben once more. Oh, thank you, Puma. Yes, I'm sure at some point we'll cover a little bit more star-related things, and if anyone has any questions, you know, you're always welcome to ask. But we are almost out of time, everybody. We're down to inside the last minute. So thank you so much for joining me. I have thoroughly enjoyed being back. I cannot wait to do it again tomorrow. So whatever your plans are for the rest of the day, I hope you enjoy them. Don't forget to join the team for the afternoon safari if you can. And I will see you again or speak to you again tomorrow between 12 and 2, 1 and 3 Central African time. But wherever you are, have a fabulous day and we'll see you soon.